Hello, welcome to this short webinar on low mood. Something which I imagine we're all working with to some extent in schools, particularly given our recent statistics that 1 in 6 children aged between 5 and 16 are likely to have a mental health need. And often we talk about other forms of mental health difficulty, but I think we're all aware that low mood and depression is something that we really need to pay attention to and revisit in our settings. So what we're going to do in this session today is briefly recap what low mood is and how this is different to depression. We're also going to consider how and when it might arise, and what you might do to identify some of the difficulties that a young person is experiencing in school. We'll guide you through some strategies of support that you can adopt within the school setting, and some of these techniques might be familiar to you already. We'll also provide some signposting to local and national services that you're able to use and signpost others onto if you require more support. And what we'll do alongside this short webinar is make sure that that signposting document is available on our website for you to access and download to store within your main selection of resources. So we wanted to start with this question. What comes to mind when you think about low mood? And on the screen you can see a word cloud of some of those other thoughts and feelings and presentations that might be observed or experienced by an individual. These were collated from our recent Schools Mental Health Network by school staff who attended on the day. And it's really interesting to see there's lots of commonalities here around difficulties with feeling withdrawn and sadness, a sense of helplessness, and lots of negativity, so that lack of optimism. We're thinking about feeling low with low motivation, a lack of self-esteem and self-confidence, and lots of difficulties kind of acting in our normal pattern of behaviours. Some people went on to think about as well what might trigger and what might cause some of those low mood experiences. So we've got friendship issues perhaps, financial worries and family breakdown. And so we'll talk about these in a little bit more detail next. So low mood can be characterised by a combination of emotions and feelings that an individual has at any given point in time. This might be a combination of sadness and loneliness. In addition, it might be feelings of anxiety and worry and panic. There might be feelings of greater tiredness and lack of motivation and low self-esteem. And additionally to that, individuals might at times feel frustrated and angry. And what's important to note though with low mood is that these feelings and emotions are likely to subside after a few days or a few weeks. And this is where it differs mostly to depression, because depression is something an individual may experience for a much longer period of time. So we're thinking in excess of 2 weeks without any shift in those levels of loneliness or low mood, sadness, and potentially an intensification of some of those feelings and emotions as well. So there can be as well a range of situations and scenarios and context that cause low mood for an individual. So thinking about adults, it might be financial pressures, bereavements, other kind of stressful life events. And for children, it might also be difficulties accessing the learning environment. It might be friendship related. All of these factors are likely to be very different for every individual, and it's not likely to be just one thing. It is often a combination of several factors influencing the presentation of that young person. And we know that it is a really common experience, and it's natural actually for us all to feel low mood from time to time. But it's when that endures for an extensive period, that's when we need to raise our concerns and when we need to seek support for that individual. It is prevalent across adults and children, and we know that the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated both anxiety and depression prevalence by 25% globally. So it's not surprising that we are seeing a greater number of young people in our settings struggling with how they're feeling.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to talk to you about the different types of depression, and later on Sarah will talk to you about the comorbidity between depression and anxiety. So firstly, there is major depression, where there are symptoms of depressed mood, loss of interest for at least 2 weeks, which interferes with daily activities. There's persistent depressive disorder, which is slightly less severe symptoms but can last much longer, at least 2 years. There is perinatal depression, which occurs during or after pregnancy. There is seasonal affective disorder, which comes and goes with the seasons, often starts in late winter and goes away during the spring and summer. There's depression with symptoms of psychosis. This is quite a severe form of depression, and the person experiences psychosis symptoms such as delusions and hallucinations. And there is bipolar disorder, where the person experiences depressive episodes and episodes of elevated mood. So how might you recognise or identify low mood in a young person in school? So depression has now been recognised within children and adolescents. Children may demonstrate irritability more than sadness. Adolescents with major depressive disorder, MDD, are more likely to engage in risk-taking and thrill-seeking behaviours such as substance use. So what we're looking for is a low mood lasting more than 2 weeks. So the young person may not be getting enjoyment out of life, feeling hopeless, feeling tired, have a lack of energy. They may be finding it difficult to concentrate on everyday things. They may be comfort eating or have a loss of appetite. They may be sleeping more than usual or having difficulty sleeping. And in some cases, they may have suicidal thoughts or thoughts of harming themselves. So in schools, you might notice a difference in attendance patterns, punctuality, academic performance. You may notice changes in appearance. They may not be looking after themselves very well, or there may be differences in their weight, changes to their personality, their behaviour, lower energy levels and withdrawal from friendship groups. And so low mood and depression is the 4th leading cause of death between 15 and 29-year-olds. And we know that some social groups are more susceptible to having low mood and depression. So in particular, the LGBTQIA+ community, those young people with existing mental health needs, particularly after the pandemic, where they can't get the same level of support that they used to have. We know that the Asian, Black and ethnic minority community can be susceptible to low mood and depression, and people genuinely just influenced by the impacts of poverty and experiencing poverty can experience depression. And we also know that young people who are excluded or suspended from school are 10 times more likely to experience poor mental health. And also there are those young people who have got additional stressors as a result of adverse childhood experiences. So this is a good visual illustration of the warning signs of depression and low mood that was developed by the Charlie Waller Trust. It's a great resource that you might want to get downloaded in school, and there is also a booklet for parents around understanding low mood and depression. So what does it feel like to have low mood and depression? So this image is from St Albans United Synagogue, who reflected on how the pandemic impacted on their mood and actions. So this cycle is an image that shows how low mood is associated with low energy. But when you are getting into a cycle of low mood, the way to break that cycle is action. So actually what you need to do is go against the urge to do less, to hide away, to not be involved. Action does not deplete our energy, but actually it creates more energy. So it's a positive impact on that cycle. So really, when you are in a low mood, one of the best things to do is to try and act in the opposite of what the low mood is telling you to do.
Thanks, Dawn. So taking action seems like a really simple step for lots of individuals. However, it might be a little bit more challenging, particularly if you are experiencing anxiety alongside your low mood and depression. We know this is a really common co-occurring presentation for individuals, both in adults and in children. And as you can see in the two sort of visuals on the slide, there are separate symptoms, both physiological symptoms and emotions and the feelings that accompany those. But there are also a number of shared symptoms that we need to be mindful of and to consider when we're thinking about the holistic needs of an individual at that time. It's quite possible that an individual is worrying about their low mood and its impact it's having and how others are perceiving them. And this is likely to fuel that worry and lead to a more self-critical presentation about themselves. And that will only go on to fuel that low mood and depression and anxiety. And the research tells us as well that mood disorders in adulthood can often commence after a period of higher anxiety in childhood. So it's something to think about when we're working with our young people, that actually we might be less aware of some of the low mood in their presentation, and we might need to be responding to the anxiety that they're showing. And this would be a really significant protective factor for their later mental health as they reach adolescence and into young adulthood. So I would advise you to go away and look at our anxiety webinar that's already on the website. And there'll be lots of crossovers as we get towards the end of this presentation, thinking about the psychoeducation that's needed for young people with a mental health need and the importance of developing coping strategies in response to some of those triggers that they experience on a day-by-day basis.
So in school, when you're working with a young person, what kinds of things can you listen out for that might be indicating that they are experiencing a low mood or depression? One of the things we can be listening out for are what we call negative automatic thoughts. And this is a way of a young person expressing themselves that doesn't particularly focus on the positives or the strengths. So you might hear the young person not really recognizing anything that they've done that's gone well, or if something has gone well, they would just suggest that that's been as a result of luck or chance. You may hear the young person catastrophizing things that are going to happen, so the worst possible scenario, the worst possible outcome. Or you might hear the young person putting themselves under quite a lot of pressure to be an ideal version of themselves by using statements as I should be able to do this, or I ought to be able to achieve that. And one of our roles really in school is to notice these negative automatic thoughts, to sort of reflect them back to the young person, to name them, and then to try and change those negative thoughts by looking for the positives, challenging and questioning if things are always as the young person is describing them, helping the young person put them into perspective, and also helping the young person be a bit kinder about themselves rather than heaping on lots of unattainable pressures. So when at school should you be looking to intervene? So there are three broad areas of what to consider. So firstly, thinking at a universal level, what mental health services can we implement that are preventative or are early interventions. So thinking about what we've got locally, so some of the RISE offers in terms of promoting and developing mental health in schools, what good strategies are on offer there from RISE. Then thinking about specific students and making a note of how they're presenting, what are you seeing in terms of intensity of how they're feeling, the severity of how they're feeling, and the duration of how they're feeling. So reflecting back on the warning signs that we've looked at previously. And then into the third level, the indicated. So this is when you've got concerns about a student that you might want to be referring into the local RISE CAMS system. So what can we do to help and support in schools? So there are a number of things that we want to be encouraging all of our pupils to be doing. And firstly, that is around self-help. So we'll talk in detail towards the end of this presentation about good habits to get into, but just on a broad level, things like good sleep patterns, healthy diet, regular exercise, adopting activities that promote good well-being in young people, such as meditation, breathing exercises, problem solving. And also for some young people, perhaps older ones, they might want to do more self-help, such as online courses or counselling. So other things that you can encourage young people to do are on this screen here, which is to listen to them. So making time in school to have those discussions with young people, to check in with how they are feeling, remembering to keep the questions open, to be prompting them, to be encouraging further talking. Also encouraging young people to keep lists and rank these in order so they can get to the heart of things. Journaling can be quite helpful for some young people, or using voice recordings to reflect about how they're feeling. But also looking for patterns, encouraging young people to look for patterns in how they are feeling. Do they feel better or worse after certain activities or events? So here are just some visual illustrations of the sorts of tools that young people could be encouraged to use in school. You can make your own, the young person can make their own, so it's more relevant to what they're experiencing.
So further ideas about what you can do to support in school for the remainder of this session are going to focus on elements drawn upon within this jigsaw puzzle. So this could be an activity that's taken from the Mental Health Centre for Kids that you use as a staff group to recognise what you already do in school underneath some of those separate headings. It could also be an activity, depending on the age of the young person that you're working with, an activity that you do with them to create their own puzzle of strategies and techniques that promote greater emotional and physical well-being, and ideally taking strategies from a number of the different areas of coping that have been suggested on the slide. So what we're going to do now is take you through each one of those and give you a flavour of what some schools are already doing, hopefully as a prompt for you to be able to think about what it is in your setting that you do really well and where you might be able to signpost some of your young people in terms of the strategies that they might be able to adopt to help themselves within school. So the first area of coping strategies that we're going to reflect on is something called behavioural activation. And as Dawn alluded to earlier, taking a small step and act against that initial feeling of not wanting to do anything can be so powerful in beginning to change the level and intensity of the low mood that an individual is feeling. So this is a framework taken from Pookie Knight-Smith. You can access this on her website, but equally you might have other templates that you might want to use or create something with the young person. What it's aiming to do is really to provide a series of short steps and goals or targets that a young person can engage with within a week before reviewing how successful they were and refining targets for the following week and refining what strategies they want to use. So here we're really thinking about ways that we can become both more physically and mentally active. And so it's important to sort of think about physical exercise as well as creative outlets such as music or art, or even perhaps daily routines and activities might fall within the behavioural activation phase as well. So whether it's organising, whether it's cleaning, and the most important thing I think when you're doing this with a young person is to think about achievable short steps. And this could be a way of tracking progress, and it can be some evidence to kind of help provide some exceptions for a young person around opportunities when they have succeeded and they have made a change, no matter how small. So we asked this question to members of Warwickshire Education Settings who attended our school mental health network, and here are some of the ideas that they came up with for how they support behavioural activation in their schools. So these include exercise with young people. So there were suggestions of going for a walk with key members of staff, engaging in the MOVES programme, having the Daily Mile or a marathon kids session each afternoon. There's other activities like gardening and forest school and using a trampette, as well as sensory circuits and taking on responsibilities like cleaning and sorting. There were some that reflected on having some of those basic essential needs being met, so participating in breakfast and having breakfast club in the morning. And then some that are more focused on the emotional and the mental side of that activation. So thinking about practicing breathing techniques in PSHE lessons alongside their peers, or engaging in Thrive support groups. So there's lots here that you might be able to reflect on, or we do something similar, or yes, we have that as part of our provision with our school setting. So it's an opportunity to identify small steps, encourage and perhaps work alongside that young person to facilitate their engagement in those activities before then coming to review how successful it was and making a plan for the following week. The second area of coping skills to think about, unsurprisingly, is relaxation skills, a way to reconnect with our bodies and to reduce that level of stress, the chemicals of cortisol and adrenaline pumping around our bodies, so that we begin to feel more harmonious with ourselves, with hopefully some of those positive endorphins and oxytocin flooding the body instead. So it's really important to reflect upon how you can facilitate and promote relaxation within your school day. And we know that schools are so busy with timetables galore, that it's really hard to sometimes think about when you can squeeze those moments in. But it's really important that they are protected and they are prioritised, as this is going to really benefit a young person who's experiencing low mood. So we're thinking about, as the Relax Kids kind of range of suggestions there allude to, it's the focusing on our breathing, it's focusing on physical muscle relaxation, and it's focusing on enjoyment and shared enjoyment with others as well. So again, some of our settings reflected on what they do, and these included having sensory breaks, both scheduled and having them as and when needed, so a little bit more incidentally. And a range of sensory resources were utilised as well. So you might have in your setting beanbags or weighted blankets, or you might have soft textiles that a young person can access. Lots of thinking about breathing and using shapes or activities there's so many out on the internet. Easy ones that you don't need any resources for. Breathing in for 4 and out for 6. The main aim, making sure that your exhale is longer than your inhale to try and calm the central nervous system. And that other strategy of using your hand. So I'm going to breathe in on the up and breathe out on the down, and repeating that. Some schools said that they offer opportunities for young people to play a game with another adult or with a child. There's talk about yoga and meditation, and Cosmic Kids was referenced, mindful colouring, as well as story massage. So something after a lunchtime that's really relaxing, that's a calm down activity for some of our younger students. And then thinking about the use of animals as well here. So some settings have a fish, some settings have therapy dogs. I know some settings have chickens. So it's how could those experiences contribute to the increase in a sense of calm and relaxation for individuals experiencing lower mood. So our third area of coping that we are going to reflect on are good health habits. And we've already touched on this a little bit earlier. But is there a way that schools can help young people to keep track or keep records of their ability to engage with a range of good health habits, whether that be their eating, whether they be their sleep or their exercise and their hygiene? We need to think about the range of health related behaviours that a young person might sort of struggle with or withdraw from when they're feeling lower in mood. So again, our schools who participated in our network meeting shared that they offer breakfast clubs and lunch clubs for young people, making sure that there are options available to tailor to their needs at that time. Equally, there are some lessons around healthy eating at snack time, so how to make a good choice around a food that is going to help not only give them energy, but is also more beneficial than another type of snack. And then we've talked about how adults might lead by example as well, by bringing in snacks that are healthier in nature and bringing in or participating in activities during the PE lessons, joining in with the guided meditations and the yoga that we expect the whole class to participate in. There might also be opportunities for weekly check-ins with pupils and having those positive conversations around well-being. And that might happen whilst you're doing another activity. So whilst you're going for a little walk around the school, in terms of needing to regulate and take your mind off things, just engaging in a conversation about what they're able to do outside of school as well as in school. So it's really an opportunity for you to think about, yes, there are things already within the curriculum, within PSHE topics that will reflect on good health habits, but what else might you be able to promote within your setting?
So other positive coping strategies we want young people to develop are thinking around their social contacts. So how can schools encourage young people who may be experiencing low mood and depression to boost their social contacts? So when we had our mental health network meeting, schools in Warwickshire reported that they were having young people decide what kinds of clubs they wanted to run, so that would promote attendance. Obviously providing lunch clubs, so making sure that young people had places to go during unstructured times where they could mix with different age groups, meet new people, and particular new people with similar interests to them. Some of our schools have developed specific friendship clubs. Some schools have developed block therapy. There is peer mentoring. Some schools have pupils taking responsibility for charity and fundraising, so that builds not only that sense of social connectedness, but also social worth, doing something for somebody else. They also promote social contact through things like reward trips, the school council, library monitors. And so just thinking around in your school what you're doing to promote young people being socially connected, to help with those feelings of belonging. Another positive coping strategy we want young people to develop is around their thinking skills. So how do you in school encourage positive self-talk? How do you support young people with problem solving? How do you challenge negative thinking, those automatic negative thoughts that we looked at earlier? How do you facilitate gratitude, optimism, hope, and a growth mindset in your school population? We know that for some young people it can be hard for them to think positively when they're in a very low mood, but some of the things that our Warwickshire schools said that they are doing which help are giving tasks to young people where they have contact with others, promoting a continuous positive regard, weekly sessions with the school's compassionate teachers, therapists, mentors, discussions with the young people on coping tools, giving different roles and responsibilities to boost confidence, modelling and promoting a growth mindset, building learning powers, focusing on positives rather than a tendency to consider what's gone wrong, and using zones of regulation to help how young people understand how they feel and what strategies they can use to support themselves. And so a final area that we want young people to reflect on are what activities, what experiences help them have a release of what we could call the happy chemicals in the brain. So thinking around what activities in school or on the school site promote the support and release of dopamine, serotonin, endorphins and oxytocin. So the kinds of activities that can be helpful are things such as exercise, listening to music, playing music, access to animals, pets, the sort of feeling of completing a daily checklist, being outside in the sunshine, practicing gratitude, maybe having some yoga sessions, and for some young people, maybe having a cold experience to wake up the body. Our Warwickshire schools reflected on this in the mental health network teams, and they noticed that they were implementing the following activities which promote happy chemicals. This was outdoor and indoor gyms, sports clubs, art activities, Move It Monday, which is an activity on the playground where all the young pupils dance first thing in the morning, breakfast clubs, reward trips, forest school, using rewards and certificates, and one school has what they call a Spa Friday, where there's certain relaxation activities are encouraged throughout the school.
You may need to think about how you're going to assess the level of need of a young person that you're working with, that you have concerns about, and also think about ways that you're going to measure the impact of any intervention or support that you put in place. So you might wish to start by referring to RISE and the Dimensions tool to gather a more in-depth profile of some of the mental health needs that this individual might have. If you go to their website, there's really clear instructions on how you as professionals will be able to complete the form alongside parents to gain a spider graph of sort of areas of strength and areas of greater need. And when that's all been completed, a report will be provided, and that will also give you some signposting and may suggest further referral if the levels meet the threshold for further support within the RISE team. You might want to gather the young person's views about how they're feeling by day, or in different activities, and so scaling activities using a 1 to 10 or an emotions kind of visual facial expression chart could be useful ways to gather this information. Observations are going to be central to assessing the need and measuring the impact in terms of the frequency of particular behaviours that you might see, observations of their engagement in learning and social activities, and all of this should be underpinned with that close collaborative working with the young person at the centre and their family around them. So just a note on where else you could go for some further support. And of course, your educational psychologist, if you have a link to your setting and a service level agreement with our service, we'd be able to offer a whole range of support to yourselves, your setting, the young person themselves. So it could be that we're involved in some holistic assessments and support and advice and guidance around the interventions that you might want to use with the young person themselves. It might be that we, as people who don't have that built up relationship, are able to come in and actually the young person's able to open up about how they're feeling. Sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't. We're able to offer support and supervision for staff when they're sort of feeling the strain and the difficulties of working with young people with a whole host of mental health needs. We could also offer staff CPD opportunities, so providing some of that evidence-based practice and some of those interventions, typically that would adopt a CBT-based approach that you could then adopt and utilise within your setting. And again, we can support with workshops and advice and thinking about signposting and sort of sharing information with parents and carers. We just wanted to highlight that there are a number of resources out there for schools. We've selected a range of cross-primary and secondary that you may wish to refer to. So we've got some workbooks like My Feelings and Me and Therapeutic Stories, as well as emotion cards that might be part of the provision and sort of the strategies that you use with young people to determine how they're feeling, and as part of that psychoeducation that you're able to provide in school. There are also a couple of workbooks that you can download for free from the Mentally Healthy Schools website, and there's also some guidance on PSHE themes around teaching mental health and how that arises for individuals to teenagers. It's really important that we also consider how we can support parents in their support of their young people at home. So we've signposted you here to 3 websites that have various information. The first is the NHS website, which gives some ideas around simple strategies that parents could utilise when they're helping their child at home. So just simply talking to their child and being curious and looking out for clues and differences in their behaviour and their presentation. And a role for school staff might be to support parents in developing some of those empathic scripts, some of those that fit alongside emotion coaching principles, that refrain from some of that judgment, that don't jump in too soon with some of the solution providing. Despite us wanting to take away that problem, it's not likely to happen overnight. And sometimes sitting with the uncomfortable feeling and validating how that young person is experiencing their world around them at that time can be that much more powerful. So working with both the range of staff in school that support the young person and the family members to develop consistent scripts that could be used would be a really helpful step for staff. There's also, as Dawn mentioned earlier, the Charlie Waller Memorial Guide to Depression that's free and easily downloadable. And there's also a guide for parents on the Young Minds website, which has also got a range of information for professionals and for young people themselves. As with all of our training and webinars, we like to leave you with some local and national organisations that we wish to signpost you to in case you need further support. So these are largely taken from the Warwickshire Mental Health and Wellbeing webpage, where a whole collation has been put together around how we go about supporting mental health in our young people. And so we've got some of our local services such as Rise and Kooth, which is a self-help app that young people aged 11 plus can access. We've also got Coventry and Warwickshire Mind, and they have wellbeing advisors available for young people aged 11 plus. We've also got Young Minds and the Anna Freud website, amongst others, that provide lots of information in a really accessible way, whether that be visuals, whether that's videos, whether that's quizzes. And they also, many of these sites have online web support and helplines that young people can access in their own time if they need to. And what we will do is we will make sure that all of these links, because it will be too difficult to write them all down now, are circulated in a document put up onto our website alongside this webinar for you to download in your own time. When you're concerned to a much greater degree about the safety and well-being of a young person given their low mood or depression, we want to signpost you to Papyrus, which is a particular website that supports young people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts, and also this Hope line that is available 24/7 for those young people who you may feel are at greater risk of harming themselves. This might be particularly useful to share to parents as well if you have concerns at the end of the day, or if perhaps it's coming to the end of a term, following through with your duty of care and your safeguarding principles and practice. These are some really helpful websites and helplines to be aware of. So we've also got a few other helplines and websites to signpost you to, particularly the NSPCC and Childline. There's opportunities for professionals to do some further reading and research and CPD development, but also perhaps for a young person who might need to speak to someone anonymously, as well as the Samaritans helpline. And in Coventry and Warwickshire, we do also have some mental health access hubs for typically those individuals who don't meet the threshold for CAMHS intervention support. So it might be worth telephoning to seek advice or visiting one of their 3 sites across Coventry and Warwickshire if it's local to you. So all that's left to say is thank you very much for joining us. Both Dawn and I really hope that you found this brief webinar reintroducing low mood and depression helpful for your consideration about what it might look like for young people in your education setting, and thinking about how you might go about beginning that support for them through a range of coping strategies and techniques. As ever, we seek your feedback. It's really valued because it helps us to inform the changes that we make to what we're producing and sharing out there. So if you're able to kind of fill that in when you've had an opportunity to digest the information from today, we'd really value it. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us. If there's any further information you require, please do contact the Educational Psychology Service using the details on the screen now. Many thanks.